My topic is insecurity, safety, and conflict-induced internal migration in Nigeria. It's also different from what others have been presenting, and this is a very interesting topic. And what motivated me about this research is in 2015-2016, I did a study funded by DFID, that is Department of International Development, through Commonwealth Fellowship. So I did a study on cross-border migration and livability of border communities in Nigeria. And one of the things I discovered was that in those rural border communities, they are remote areas, you know. I discovered that majority of the people in those areas, they are people that migrated from extreme parts of the country, you know, from conflict area. So they migrated to the other extreme part of the country because of what? Because of safety. They were looking for safety. And so that actually created a kind of question in my heart that there's need for me to study this. And so I started to work on insecurity, safety, and conflict-induced internal migration in Nigeria. So I want to begin with a story. So this is not a statistics. Sorry. Hope I'm not. Okay, so I said this is not a statistics because behind every data set in this research are real human beings navigating fear, loss, and resilience. And so I'll start with this story. At 2:13 a.m., Amina woke up to the sound of gunfire. Not the distant kind she had learned to ignore, but the kind that shakes the walls, the kind that tells you your life has changed forever. She grabbed her two children, still half asleep, and ran into the darkness. Behind her, the only home she had ever known was burning. Ahead of her was a journey she did not choose. A journey through forest, checkpoints, hunger, and fear. 3 days later, barefoot and exhausted, she arrived in Edo State. Not because it was close, not because she knew anyone there, but because it was the first place where she heard a rumor. There's a camp in Uogwa and it is safe. Amina's story is not unique. It is the story of thousands of Nigerians whose lives have been reshaped by insecurity, whose movement is not migration in the traditional sense of it, but forced survival. And it is their story, their safety, their dignity, their livability that brought me here today. And so Amina represents the lived reality of many internal displaced persons who arrived at Uogwa camp after fleeing conflict zones across Nigeria. Their journeys are shaped not by choice, but by insecurity, insurgency in the northeast, banditry in the northwest, herders-farmer clashes in the north-central region, and other forms of violence across the country. This research is not only about numbers, it is about understanding the conditions that shape safety, dignity, and livability for displaced populations. So with this context, I will now walk you through the rest of my presentation. So listen. Now, Nigeria is a very beautiful country. I'm a Nigerian, and it's a very beautiful country. It is a large West African country with diverse landscapes and populations. It is situated in West Africa in latitude 4 degrees north and longitude 220 degrees east. It is bounded in the west by Republic of Benin, in the east by Chad and Cameroon, in the north by Niger Republic, and in the south by Gulf of Guinea. It is structured into 6 geopolitical zones, with each shaped by unique socioeconomic, cultural, and security realities. We still delve into that. Okay. Now my background. I said there is rising insecurity in Nigeria. Nigeria faces multiple humanitarian crises. We talk about insecurity, conflict, and forced migration, also called displacement. And this forced migration is majorly due to violence, conflict, or disasters. And according to Internal Displacement and Monitoring Center, 70 to 80% of internally displaced persons that are affected by forced migration are women and children. So though this is 2019, I should have updated it. So now the problem statement: insecurity, that is rising violence, conflict in Nigeria, leading to large-scale migration. The IDP challenges, that is when they migrate, the challenges they face when they migrate to IDP camps or into neighboring communities. We have loss of livelihoods, poor access to services, and extreme safety risk. Now, the research gap in this is that limited existing studies on the planning implications of this migration and camp livability conditions. Sorry, I'm a social planner, so I'm coming from the point of being a social planner. That is, when these people migrate, when they are forced to migrate, as planners, there are limited planning for these IDPs, that is, these migrants, these forced evicted migrants. The planning for them are so limited, and the IDPs or the communities that are receiving them, there is this overstretched of facilities or infrastructure. There's this overstretch, and so it creates a kind of challenges for cohesion or for integration, let me put it that way. And so it's a major problem for planning, and that is one of the planning implications we'll look at. Now, the conceptual framework, I decided to choose migration continuum, which has to do with knowing the before migration, during migration, and after migration. It's very important that we look into the migration continuum, because you might not be able to get the whole story if you don't know what was happening before, what happened during migration, what happened before migration, what happened during migration, and after migration. Migration in this context, I'm talking about displacements. So now, the pre-displacement, I said root drivers include ideological extremism, ecological scarcity, political marginalization at the point of origin. I'll quickly run through that, or maybe I will talk about that later because of time. Then during the journey, why they are migrating, there's this, I'll also talk about it, the transition phase. We call it the transition phase. That is forced exit, transit risk, asset loss, fragmentation of critical family units. And the last one, which is the settlement, that is their emplacement in IDPs and communities, integration into host communities or IDP camps like the one we have in Uogwa. So as far as these migrants, what is always at the back of their mind is, are they safe where they are going? If they are not safe where they are going, it's the same with where they are coming from. So this safety is very important to them as what IDPs. So I wrote a national conflict landscape. So insecurity in Nigeria is decentralized and varies significantly by geopolitical zone. In the Northeast, we have insurgency and extremism. And I quickly run through that. Okay, in the Northeast, sorry, the second one is Northwest, we have banditry and kidnapping. In the North Central, we have farmer herders, ecological crisis. And in the southern eastern part, that is, we have the South-South, we have the Southwest, we have the resource control and urban crime. I quickly run through that. So I start with the Northwest. So we have challenges like cattle rustling, looting villages, long-standing farmer herders conflicts, armed attacks in rural communities. So these are one of the major challenges in the Northwest. In the Northeast, the challenge here is, it has to do with spreading belief system. That is, they have ideological caliphate push. They have this ideological, we have this ideological extremists. They have this idea of imposing their own beliefs to overthrow governance. That is, they push caliphate as the only legitimate form of governance. They reject modern nation-state borders. And it is about, the thing about them is that they have the belief system aimed at replacing existing government with strict extremists. Then the other one, which is the South-South, we put it as resource control. That is, they have this demand by the local communities in the oil producing areas to have more control, more benefits, and so they try to have it. So we see them, people see them as militant. You know, they want to have control since it is their land, and then their land is being abused, so they want to have control of their land. So through that, there are several agitations in those communities. I will still talk about others with time. So now, dimensions of regional insecurity, like I explained earlier, the geopolitical zones, conflict label, key actors, core dimensions. Now, in the Northeast, like I explained earlier, you have the insurgency zone, and the key actors here, they are the ISWAP, Boko Haram. Now, the ISWAP, they call them Islamic States of West African, where did I write it? So I've tried to remember. Islamic State of West Africa. You know, like I said earlier, you know, they try to put their own ideologies on the people there. They push caliphate as the only legitimate forms of governance. Then in Northwest, the conflict label about them is banditry, you know, and the key actors are criminal gangs. The core dimension here is resource warlordism. That is, there is gold in this region. And so you see a lot of people, they use guerrilla warfare. That is, camp bushes, they loot, they run, they attack people. And there is another thing there, also farmers, others, conflict in that region. Then the North Central, they also have farmers, others, conflicts. The major actors here is ethnic militias, and the core dimension here is ecological land competition. There's this competition for scarce resources, especially water, you know, for the farmers. So you see a kind of competition between the farmers and the herders, that's the cattle herders. So you see farmers, you see herders bringing their cattle to hit the farmers' farm products. And so it creates a kind of conflict in the region. Then the South is, you have the label as separatism. Then you have the IPOB, that is indigenous people of Biafra. And the core dimension here is political independence. That is, they want independence. Then the last one, which is South-South, like I explained earlier, militancy. Then we have more of cultists, bunkers, and the core dimension here is resource control, oil. Now, the last part, you know, I talked about the last part. I said it's migration continuum. You have the pre, you have the during, and you have the post. That is emplacement. And I tried to pick IDP camp, Uogwa IDP camp, because it is faith-based, and there is this thing about them. They feel people, these IDPs, they feel safe in that camp. So we decided to use this IDP camp as a case study. So the primary survey, we surveyed 143 IDPs using a stratified sampling. It's scientific. I might not go into details. Then the origin survivors, primarily from Borno and Adamawa. That is, most of the survivors are from the Northeast. Then the objective is to assess level of safety and livability of post-settlement. That is, do they feel safe in this camp? Because it's not every camp that the IDPs feel safe. But in this particular one, at least majority of them feel safe. You see it in the result. Then to measure the livability, I made use of PCA, principal component analysis, to measure the livability of the area. That is, you create a kind of livability index. There are some indicators we use and regression models. So now, these are part of the findings. In the findings, majority are females. We have 54.5% females. We have children, about 55.9% children. The single, 62.9%. The origin, mostly from the conflict-affected regions of Northeast. Then livelihood shift. There is a livelihood shift from farming to limited economic activities. Also, economic status disruption. You have no income before. For those people that don't have income, they were 44%. But after that, after this migration, it increased to 60%, 60.1%. Also for stable trading, before it was 31.5%. After migration, it was 14%. So for livability and safety indicators, I don't want to go into details. So 67% consider the camp livable. And there are so many indicators that were used to measure livability of the camp, which I might not, because of that, I don't want to go into details. So now, primary safety drivers are number one, shelter quality. So strongest statistical predictor of perceived safety. That is, majority of them, of the IDPs, perceived shelter as being safe. Then number two, service access, reliability of water, health and primary education. That is, for the children there, so they have reliability of water, the health, they have health centers, and primary education, they have schools, primary schools. Then social cohesion, sense of community built within the camp environment. So with this kind of thing, that is why you have so many IDPs running into this particular IDP camp. So gender dimension of migration. So heightened risk, like I said earlier, I talked about migration continuum, the pre-migration, the during migration, and the post-migration. Now, this one, I decided to put it here. I should have put it earlier, but because it's also the same with the findings. So heightened risk, why the women, the children, while they were migrating down, women faced disproportionate threats during the journey. That is, gender-based violence, asset theft. There were a lot of rape cases and different things. The protection gaps, significant lack of formal protection system in transit corridor, and informal settlement host to zone. Then another thing is family fragility. Like for a particular household, the husband might not be seen again, or maybe one of the children, a loss of one of the children, or there's this family fragility. Also, fragmentation leads to the total loss of social safety nets for dependent children and elderly IDPs. So elderly children, women were most, and pregnant women specifically were most affected. Now, implications of conflict-induced migration. What are the implications of this? So number one, loss of homes and livelihood, loss of social networks, increased vulnerability, dependency on aid, then pressure on camp infrastructure and planning systems. Now, what are the planning and regional response? Number one, integrated planning, moving beyond emergency to long-term urban integration. That is beyond just providing them with emergency relief. There is need for long-term urban integration for them to be well integrated into the society. Number two, resilient infrastructure. That is modular safe housing designs for displaced family. Beyond camps and stuff, there's need for modular safe housing designs for displaced families. And then number three, governance, enhanced coordination between regional planners and security agencies. So it's not a standalone thing. It should be a kind of collaborations between regional planners and security agencies so that the place can be livable for the IDPs. Now, conclusion and strategic path forward. Institutional shift. Recognize internal migration is a structural reality and it's not an episode. That is, it's not a one thing, it's not a one-time thing, it's a structural reality. Then number two, safety nets, safety first. Strengthen formal safety systems in informal IDP settlements to bridge protection gaps. Then number three, human capital. Improve access to basic health and specialized vocational education within camps. Then number four, gender focus. Implement gender-responsive migration policies at the regional government level. Now, I wrote something here. I said conflict is the driver, but planning is the solution. So people have migrated from these areas, but when they come to your camps, when they are in place in camps, planning should be the solution and not a challenge again to them, especially in terms of security or safety. So thank you. So please, I wrote here, there's a final statement I wrote here. I said, if safety had a sound for many displaced families, it would be the quiet of a night where no one is running. If livability had a shape, it would be a roof that doesn't leak and a school where a child can dream. As we think about planning, policy, and resilience, I invite you to hold these shapes and sound with me, because they are not abstract concepts, they are the architecture of survival. Thank you very much.